once again, we've got a very special guest. Oh, you don't have something to say about special guest this time?
No,
okay.
It's cool because he said it's cool.
Oh, okay, cool. So we got a very special guest at day one in some aspects. Our homie Chillmonger.
Hey, happy to be here as usual.
Definitely appreciate you. Last time we discussed Miss Marvel as it was kind of in the beginning stages. I think only one episode had been out. So obviously we wanted to kind of see your thoughts on the series as a whole now that we're past 5 and coming up on episode 6, the finale.
Yep.
Look, I like that it's a character named Kamala Khan who's Desi from a country called Pakistan who moved over to America and has traditional values. And I love that we're getting something that isn't just like standard white folk superhero. Awesome thing. Diversity, great. Social awareness of people who are different than just white folks, awesome. Okay, let's get that out the way. That disclaimer out the way, because this isn't one of those channels, and we're not one of those people. However, it's like the show really took the onus on like showcasing what the culture is, showcasing the history of what actually happened during the partition, a little bit too seriously to where we are right now in episode 5. Where we spent like 17 minutes of the episode, who's counting? 17 minutes of Aisha like experiencing what happened from those evil Britain colonizers over here who just left India to shambles. Like, did that really matter? Did we really need to see that? Did we really, like, the audience, you have an accepting viewership who wants to see this character succeed and are open and are already not hateful. They didn't need the history lesson of what happened in that country, especially when none of it had to do with anything, because Aisha dies the moment she meets Kamala. It's not like all the information that she learned and everything we gathered from the beginning of this episode transferred over to Kamala. She just sort of died, and like the story ended there. You know, it was very nonsensical as far as like storytelling goes. Like, it was just a dead end plot line, and that's just episode 5. I've got issues with episode 4 and other things too. I'll let you guys speak on that because I talked way too long on it.
I got the same feeling. I thought at least if you're giving her the ability to walk through time, then maybe she should be there. Maybe she should be involved more so than just saving her grandmother. You know, maybe she should be involved with the moving along of that plot thread, and then it would make it feel more meaningful. And then also, in turn, you'd be killing 2 birds at one stone. You'd be acknowledging Aisha and bringing her into the story, which has been teased since the first episode, pretty much. And then you'd also be building up Kamala Khan. But it seems like they cannot walk and chew gum at the same time. It's either over to the side of representation and storytelling and history, or it's back to Kamala's main story. But it's never been both with any subplot.
I hate that representation is a crux over here, because the subplot of Nakia, when she was running to be elected in the mosque board, that's totally a subplot, and you know, she'll get it the very next episode and she'll hug Kamala, but that's it. I doubt, I could be proven wrong, but in episode 6 maybe her position on the board will mean something. I can be proven wrong and maybe that'll be true, but from where it looks like it's heading, that's not going to be relevant at all. What you wanted to do, what the show writers wanted to do, was to showcase this faith in a light that you would have never thought of, because you just think of, oh, Muslims, they pray. Okay, maybe you know that they take their shoes off before they step on the nice carpet. Maybe you knew that, but I bet you didn't know that there's some sort of structure here at this center where they elect members who, you know, who make choice, like that. You wanted to do something that was very nice to do, which is offer a perspective of Muslim characters in a light that isn't airplanes and hijackings and stuff, which is a great thing to do. Except it's just like, it didn't help the story move forward. It's another subplot
that she's not involved in. I don't understand the logic of having so many subplots where she's not involved at all.
The show writers said, whoa, we have such an underrepresented character, religion, faith, and even the city, New Jersey, honestly. But like, there's such that was underrepresented that we got to overrepresent it here on the show. And what it took away was from Kamala Khan, and maybe like her discovering like, hey, maybe I can stretch, cool, let me work on my stretching powers. In episode 2 maybe I can't stretch that far, but by episode 3 I can really knock a guy out, and like seeing progression for the character. Rather than that, we had scenes that went elsewhere, and the main, the big one from episode 4. Okay, it was felt like it was some sort of travel brochure advertisement for Karachi, the city of lights. Of course, you're gonna get that montage where you kind of see her step out the airport. She's looking outside the car and she sees all of the scenery. That's normal. That's something you do to set the tone or the pace or the setting of the show, and that's all fine. But when you get into like biryani is spicy, let's kick it. Like, let's show you guys a normal day in the teenage lives of these Karachi youth. Let's it. That's minutes that could have been taken away from a more serious moment. For example, the boy Red Dagger was throwing knives at Kamala, yeah? A minute later, come with me if you want to live, and she's following him.
Yeah, no, why would I come with you? Why you were just trying to kill me?
Maybe if the show had more minutes spent on that, maybe you could see him now saving her from like the policemen who are trying to capture her. Maybe you could have made a reason for why she would be convinced, okay, this dude who was just throwing knives at me now is on my side, and I'm convinced. That didn't happen though, because maybe minutes were given on like the history lesson, the cousins, the everything to do with this. I forgot the episode was like 2 weeks ago, but like everything that didn't have to do with the plot of the show, the reason they went to that country or to speak to her grandmother. And it's almost like that conversation was you know how long it took in that episode to actually get to that conversation. And
that was the whole point of going to Karachi, was to talk to her grandmother about about the bangle.
And we could have gotten more about the bangle. It was just such a short. So yeah, I am disappointed in the whackness of it. However, like you and I, we have standards, we have taste. There's a lot of Marvel fans who are digging this, who are like, this is the best show ever. I love the doodles that are on the screen. It feels good. It's a rich character, and they're liking it. And I'm happy for people who like it, because if this character succeeds and we get a second season of it, I mean, it's a win for me. I just hope that the same screenwriter isn't on. And they can keep the directors who did the first episode, Adil and Bilal, because those were the guys who did the Bad Boys movie. I think they've got some other things under their belt that's like that's liked. Let's keep those directors and maybe get them on all 6 episodes, rather than these other directors who just kind of want to showcase.
I think where Marvel has kind of missed their mark when it comes to representation is that instead of focusing on telling a good story for a minority character, they're so focused on shoehorning in the fact that, hey, we get it, we're there, like we understand, we know what's going on with you guys, instead of actually just focusing on actually telling a good story, right? It should be a good story mixed in with, representation of our culture, as opposed to, hey, like we're going to shove all this information in at you to show you that we get it.
I think that comes by way of the political apparatus that all of this is born out of. That's the way that they view representation, and to kind of stay of that same ilk, that's how they see representation, they being Disney, right? It's representative to do history lessons and show what kind of food you eat and how do you get married and things of that nature. How does your culture liken back to that of westernized or American culture? Right.
I'm not going to pin Disney. I'm going to pin the creators that Disney hired. Disney, the editors and Feige and all those guys who don't happen to be from that world. They probably read that script. They probably looked at the footage that was shot, and they okayed it because they don't know any better, because they're like, oh, we're not hateful people. Of course we have no problem with this wedding. We're not hateful. Of course we have no problem with but I would give it to the show writer, who just, like I kept saying earlier, it's such an underrepresented character and part of the world, where she was like, I'm gonna shove this all in here like no tomorrow, when I really feel like normalization is the best way of showing representation. I feel like Hawkeye was a show that had Christmas, which is a major Christian holiday. Everyone knows Christmas. I mean, yeah, me saying that is ridiculous, right? Having to explain it's on the 25th of December. But like here, for the Muslim holiday, they're like, Eid. Which Eid? Because there's 2 Eids, right? They're like, it's the lesser one. They never said like, which Jesus holiday? Is it the one where he dies, or is it the resurrection one? Which one is this? They never said that for Hawkeye during Christmas. We just kind of had Christmas being a theme during the show. We had the decorations in the background, and they served, for authenticity's sake, because that's what happens in New York City during December. It's kind of like festive and stuff. That principle wasn't practiced. That wasn't applied here, implemented here in the Kamala Khan show. In fact, they're going way too deep in the opposite direction. I don't know how loud our voices are, though. Me and you, Marcus, are like against this. how many others are, because others are too afraid right now to speak out against it, because then they would seem to be the ones who are like hateful and opposing to just any other culture. And the popular voices,
That's what it is. That I was gonna say, that's what it is. It's that most of the people who oppose it from an angle of just blind hate. They're not making well thought out critiques. They're like, oh no, brown girl, Muslims, get that out of my comic books kind of thing. It's like and I can't lump myself in. I can't lump myself in with that group, because obviously that's not the way I think. It's kind of hard to have a nuanced thought of wanting this character to succeed, to want success for this character, but then also be harsh about the way that it's being presented. I had a couple things that stuck out to me over the last couple episodes I wanted to ask you about. The first thing, with Kamala and her fighting prowess, how did we get from her realizing that she has supernatural powers to her being able to fight any and every threat that she's faced with very little slippage or mistakes? She had the one instance with the almost dropping the boy, right? And she got slightly injured in the midst of that. But fighting hand to hand with jinn or clandestines, whatever we're calling them these days, that have been fighting for hundreds of years. How is it that she's able to keep up when she found out that she had powers 2 weeks ago? Not just in the sense of using her powers, but literally fighting. Where did the fighting prowess come from?
oh, I don't got the answers.
Like, where did that come from? That was the first thing that stuck out to me. And then the second thing was that in episode 5, when we're in Karachi and we're showing Aisha and her husband and the origin of their relationship, right? I couldn't help but ask myself, like, why they were speaking so much English for a show.
I noticed that too. Yeah,
it was so important to show all the culture and all the historical figures, and it even gave us a Hooked on Phonics lesson about partition in the beginning of the episode, right? But then literally for the first 15 minutes of the episode, they're in the middle of Karachi speaking like very plain King's English.
What's worse is that there was a moment where we saw Urdu with little subtitles. So then I'm just thinking, like, so are they? Because Marcus, if they're just speaking English the whole way through, then I'd be like, what's really happening is they're speaking in Urdu, but the show just was like translating it for us. Just like when I watched the Black Panther movie, so many of those scenes happened in Wakanda. I'm pretty sure a lot of those scenes were in their language,
Right.
and it was in English just for us, the audience. But except when you start speaking the other language and then going back to English, then I just I'm
now I can see it. So it's like when there's a chance to actually, right? Because if those 2 or 3 scenes that led up to Aisha running into the other clandestines and her getting threatened were all in their language, right? To me, that does more to force me as a viewer to immerse myself in that world than what they've been trying for the most part in this show. Like, it's just like Narcos. I swear to God, I put myself back into 11th grade Spanish by watching Narcos. I swear, because they force you as a viewer to immerse yourself in that culture, right? It's not a, oh hey look, they're just like you kind of thing. Like, this is it. They're speaking as if you got implanted into that country and this is what you hear and see.
It reminds me of like when you watch Japanese anime and you have the subtitles on there. So at some point you're just so immersed. You're like Yamada, and you're like, yeah, that means stop.
Yeah, you get it, right? You start picking stuff up. But there's no encouragement to do that if I'm like force feeding you the nuggets of information that I personally, as the writer of the show, think are important. That's why it's a very thin line to walk when you're talking about writing your own experiences in your own projects. Man, more to come on that this week. It's a very thin line because you can end up hurting the story. I guess that's the simplest way I can put it.
This story wasn't a priority here, because if this was a superhero story that was prioritized, that moment in Iron Man that ended the movie, I am Iron Man, and we go, oh, his secret identity was revealed. This is a major moment. that her identity was revealed to her mom here, and how did it not land? You know, like how did that not be an episode ender? How was that not the cliffhanger? And then also, since it wasn't the cliffhanger, how quickly did we just get over that? You know, oh, you're the light girl. A lot of customers or viewers here at Marvel Studios, they hopped on in 2008 when it was pretty white. 2012, pretty white again, all the way up to like 2018. I think it was the first black movie, Black Panther. So they're in. And then, you know, out of the completionist nature that they have, they're going to want to continue watching these shows. So they know the show writer and everyone involved know that they kind of have this built-in audience. So they're like, let's humanize these brown people. That's what will happen.
Yeah, when you lay out superficial building blocks, your reveals end up feeling superficial. They end up feeling light, and that's pretty much what we got. Like, even the loose threads of, you know, Kamala's mom and her I guess spat with her mother, with Kamala's grandmother over, you know, the stories of the clandestines and all that other, you know, all that stuff. The impact didn't really hit us when her mother saw Kamala using her powers, because we only spent about 3 minutes talking about how that affected her in this very forced exposaic conversation between a daughter and her mother. I didn't need the stories, mommy. I needed you. Well, okay. Thanks. Where's Kamala right now?
How does this? Yeah. There were good parts though. I laughed when Bruno, well, not Bruno, what's his name? Kamran was calling Bruno Brian the whole time, and he finally had to call him Bruno for the first.
Zero shot. So the entire time you've been calling him Brian, you didn't hear him respond not one time and be like, I feel like he's calling me Brian on purpose. You never heard that? No time. He's been saying it out loud.
But he was always like away, and Bruno would always say that under his breath.
Boy, he was like right at the car walking away. He was like, all right, Brian. He was like, I swear to God, he's doing that on purpose. You never heard that at any point? Or you never heard Nakia or Kamala call him Bruno?
No, he was never within earshot. Come on now.
What?
It looks like we're up for like a big showdown between Kamran and Kamala. I'm not really sure if Kamran is possessed or if he'll be himself.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about that next. What do you think happened with his mom when she sealed the gate? Did she go into Kamran or
something like that must have happened? Yeah, she'll be in control. She'll be fighting, and the superpowers sort of look like also they're hard to light. Marvel's been doing that. You know how the Black Panther fought with Killmonger, who was a Black Panther. You know how Iron Man in his first movie he fought, what's his name, Ironmonger, was it? And you know, there's always the double of what your powers are originally. Ant-Man fought Yellow Jacket, you know, so they'll.
Oh yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. The polar opposite of the character is usually the first villain that they encounter. I don't know, man. I was sitting up there thinking as episode 5 was ending, and I was like, so what are we gonna do to wrap up this series? Because this feels pretty final. Like everything that was wrapping up at the end of that episode until Kamran made it feel very, all right, this is it. Like everything's taken care of now. The hole's closed. Clandestines are taken care of. Mommy knows I'm Miss Marvel. It all felt pretty complete prematurely because we know we have a whole nother episode. So are we going to spend the whole episode fighting Kamran? I think not.
Nakia also, because she's probably going to confront her finally because they weren't answering each other's texts.
I was about to say, for 2 episodes, we just threw Nakia to the sideline after we made it very important that she found out that Kamala was Miss Marvel, and then she disappeared for 2 episodes. Was there a scheduling conflict? Could we not get the actor in the episodes? Like, where did she go? I understand the ignoring thing, but we didn't even show her perspective on what was going when there's finally a side plot connected to Kamala. We spent all this time going back to Nakia's story when she's not connected to Kamala, but when she actually has a direct plot thread that's connected to Kamala, there's no scene from her perspective.
It shows you what they prioritized. It was that side plot. It was because they wanted to showcase themes from the culture, religion too, and that was her she served that purpose, not this show. You know what they got right in this show? Casting Kamala Khan, a brown girl. That's about it. They didn't get her superpowers right. They didn't get a lot about the stories in the comic book right. They're not exactly accurate. You know, they took liberties where they wanted to take liberties at. Look, one thing in Thor: Love and Thunder. Not, I'm not gonna spoil guys, but in the Marvel Studios sort of intro that happens in every movie, you actually got to see Kamala Khan in her all blue with the lightning bolt. So that scene is probably gonna happen in episode 6. The lightning bolt looks like it's gonna come from her necklace that kind of broke, and if
Doesn't that mean her name, or it's like the first letter of her name, the K?
Kamala and the letter Kaf, aka the letter K, if you turn it sideways, it looks like that lightning bolt. So that's the origin, or that's, I guess, where she'll get the lightning bolt. It won't actually be from Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, which maybe means Carol Danvers won't cameo in the episode. I'd love if she did. I like the Captain Marvel movie. I got nothing really against the actress either. I would like to see, the big time movie people show up here in the small time shows. It would add
It would make it more connective. It would make it mean something. Like I'm still struggling with the fact that most of these shows feel so isolated from the greater MCU, outside of maybe Loki. WandaVision to start, but only because I felt like the scope of these television shows was just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that hasn't really happened. I thought WandaVision was a jumping off point to expand at each new show. And it has been a very grounded, isolated story for each one of them. I think you're right. Adding some of the mainstay characters to these TV shows, if it's nothing else than a cameo, extra credit scene after the last episode, something that lets us know that what they are doing here in New York, the only place where people live in the MCU, that there are other people watching and they know what's going on. Bruce Banner is still out there somewhere. We saw that at the end of Shang-Chi. I'm assuming that Rocket and Okoye and whoever took over for Nat are still in communication with whatever that random council was, Discount Illuminati, right? I'm sure that they still meet at some point and discuss threats and things that are coming up. Hey, there's all these damn teenagers running around with powers and fighting crime in New York. Maybe we should go investigate and get them to calm down, risking their lives. There's none of that. There's nothing that tells us that this is part of the greater MCU world that we just spent the last 15 years watching, other than loose connections to certain characters and things of that nature. But it's like, I don't know, man. We actually have we got a segment coming out about what we've seen so far out of Phase 4 and some thoughts. I'll save some of that, but I will say it feels like, to me, I can't speak for anybody else, but it feels like the darker the character, the less meaningful story. And that just kind of feels like where we're at with it. We've got Kate Bishop, who assumably, at very least, is going to be Hawkeye's sidekick going forward. We had Jane Foster, who got to take over the mantle, at least for this movie. We got She-Hulk coming. We've got Brie Larson, Captain Marvel's going to get her second movie coming up in 2023. Wasp is coming back. Ant-Man's coming back. There are a lot of people elevating or sustaining their positions. And then you go further down the list, people that look a little bit more like you and me, and it seems like very stagnant, grounded storylines that keep them exactly where they are and don't connect them to the greater MCU. That's at least my thought on what the MCU Phase 4 has been so far.
I guess when you do so many projects, which Phase 4 is full of them, it's like, don't mention the other thing because we don't want to get mucky, because especially with release dates constantly shifting, they learned probably from what Sony did to them, because Doctor Strange was supposed to come out first and then Spider-Man was supposed to come next. But because Sony wasn't budging from that Christmas release date, they had to make some rewrites. So they probably learned, okay, nothing right now is stable. And I do want to blame the COVID-19 restrictions and delays for that, because I'm a Marvel fan. I'm going to give them that grace.
Only a little bit. Only a little. I'll give a little bit of bail for that. A little bit. I give them as much grace as they deserve. Some positions and some decisions are indefensible. And then also, I try my best to judge everybody on the same playing field. So if you're the company, right? If you're the media conglomerate, then you are the one setting the standard for me. You're telling me what you deem as important or substantial or worth perpetuating and keep a story going on and so what and so forth. So a standard arc for a leading character in Marvel is what? 2 to 3 films, couple cameos, and big superhero team-ups, right? So if I can do that list and I can have a list of white characters and non-white characters. And the only time I get discrepancies from that standard is when I'm looking at the non-white characters. That's not something I can give you grace for. You can give me all the flowery pontification that you want. You can give me all of the sweet words that you can think of. But at the end of the day, if I got that list in front of me, there's going to be very stark differences between how the white characters are produced and made TV shows for. Because something tells me when Matt Murdock finally gets a series, they're not going to have a hard time pumping up Matt Murdock. They're not going to have a hard time building up the character of Matt Murdock, making the story about him. Now tell me why it's hard for Kamala Khan to have a story made about her and build her up. But there's no way on God's green earth we'd be watching a Daredevil miniseries and Foggy means more than Matt Murdock.
And hey, I bet that Daredevil miniseries, they'll treat his faith with the Catholic religion and that way better than they're treating what's happening here with Kamala.
For sure. And they won't have to try to handhold you through representation classes about Catholicism. They will just give you the very light things that every common person knows about being Catholic, you know, mass, communion, that kind of stuff, and they will move on.
Kind of similar to what we were talking about in our Thor review, where they kind of sacrificed character development for the jokes, at least in that movie.
Yeah, Taika is a whole nother animal, man. That guy. I love so many of his projects that aren't in the MCU. But it's because it's not dependent on being serious when he's not making movies in the MCU. At some point, if we're talking about superheroes fighting a villain, you got to have real stakes. And his jokey style just kind of...
But it seems like they almost sacrificed completely, for example, Jane's actual development in the movie because they wanted to shoehorn a shit ton of jokes into the movie. Whereas it seems
a lot
like,
of stuff for jokes.
It seems like they sacrificed in the show her development to kind of show like, oh, we understand, you know, Muslims in the Islamic faith. We understand the community as a whole. So we're going to shoehorn that in as opposed to actually, you know, developing. And it's even worse in the show because they have so much more time to do it. But they kind of sacrificed the development of Kamala and, you know, other
I would actually say it's worse on a movie than on a show because on a TV show you have multiple creators. You may have multiple writers. You may have multiple producers. So there's multiple perspectives going in to each episode. That lends itself to having a little bit of inconsistency.
Yeah.
A movie, it's the same person writing the script all the way through. It's the same person directing all the way through. It's the same producer. That's one clear vision as opposed to many visions on an episode per basis.
A producer gets dailies, right? Like every day that something's shot, he'll look over it. That's what they're called. They're the daily edit. Yeah. Hey, one thing you just made me think of before we end it. Even the representation of Islam, they made one little botch. If you guys remember in the second episode how they were late to get to the masjid and they're like, oh, I gotta hurry up and gotta get there. And then you see them all, both in the front row. I'm like, no. You can't be late and still be in the front row. You'd be way in the back. Inconsistency, but I guess that was just for the cameras. That's all.
Yeah, you probably even wouldn't want to. If I showed up late to church, I'm not going to sit right directly in front of the pastor and announce to him, hey, I'm late.
And the whole congregation, everybody in the church sees
you walking to the front. So we didn't end up getting our mid-season review with Chill out before the finale. So let's do a quick review on episode 6. Give you some of my major thoughts. I won't spend too much time, you know, rehashing the season. I think we did a lot of that with Chill, but just to kind of give you some of the major points that I thought stuck out to me or I thought were important for her moving on in the MCU, meaning Kamala Khan. First thing is that they didn't really spend a whole lot of time on the family's reveal of being Kamala Khan. Like, obviously her mom finds out first, and shout out to Chillmonger about this in his his episode 6 review. Make sure you head over to his channel, check that out as well. They kind of rush through it, right? Her mom finds out in episode 5. We pick up in episode 6, and it's just like, oh yeah, all right, everybody in the living room, boom, I'm Kamala Khan. And then it's almost like we're moving so fast to everyone else getting the knowledge that she's Kamala Khan that now it's almost it has to be lighthearted. Like we can't you can't take it seriously as an audience, so they almost can't tell it to you seriously because we have to get on to other things that happen later on in this episode. I think it's a little bit of a contrast, and I think that's why it stands out a little bit because her mom was so protective in the beginning of this series. Which I mean, they do. I will give them credit where credit's due. They do a good job of laying down the groundwork as to why. But then the shift is not necessarily clear. It's like, well, Kamala's been lying the whole series, and that makes her mom weary about what's going on with her in her life. And then that doesn't really change at any point. She just finds out what it is that Kamala's lying about, and then all of a sudden it's okay. So, I mean, that part of the plot is a little loose. And then also, I feel like her father, while I guess I appreciated the acceptance of Kamala in her life as a hero now, it also, just thinking about being a parent, how that would make you feel like, your child didn't trust you enough to have this with you or give you that information, or even if you want to try the petty side of it and it's like, oh, well, your mom know, why don't I know? You know what I mean? So it just kind of felt like everything moved kind of fast and we glossed over it with jokes. The costume reveal. So I do know that this is different from the canon, from comic books explanation of how she gets her suit. I don't really have an explicit problem with it being different in that instance. It's not that big of a detail. It looks pretty accurate, so that's a plus as long as we ended up with the same costume. I just don't understand where she got it from. Like, mom just pops up with a legitimate superhero suit in a toffee box. Like did Nani get that? Like, your grandma, she made that? She makes superhero suits? Who else has she made suits for? The biggest thing that was a problem for me in episode 6, that I think is kind of almost a running joke at this point, is Kamala Khan's secret identity. Several times in this episode alone, like big, blaring, hi, I'm Ms. Marvel. I'm Ms. Marvel. Me, right here, stamped on my forehead. Me, Ms. Marvel. One being, the final fight scene where the damage control agents have Kamran and Kamala cornered there in front of the school, and after Kamran is able to escape, Kamala Khan is surrounded by the crowd. Her parents are literally running to her, screaming her name. They are the first ones to embrace her in the middle of that scrum. That's one. All the people that were arrested and then conveniently unhandcuffed and unlock of the car door. That was something. But anyways, all the people that were arrested in the school were connected back to Kamala Khan in some way. The only common person between all 4 people that got arrested was Kamala. Her window in her house is like thrashed through. So if I'm living in Jersey and I know superheroes been fighting in the neighborhood for the last 3 or 4 nights, and you got a big ass hole in your window in a human shape, I think at some point it just becomes like a like an inside joke. You just kind of got to roll with it because it's very obvious. I guess you could say I heard Tillmonger mention this. If that's probably how the damage control agents showed up, how they found her at the school. Sure. I mean, we're playing loose and fast with the plot anyway, so why not? I don't know. They didn't exactly explain how or whether they knew that was Kamala Khan either, but it seemed painfully obvious to the audience. So it's just a couple things that stuck out to me that didn't necessarily fit or go according to plan. Some of the more positive stuff, or the stuff that's actually going to matter moving forward in the MCU for Kamala. So the first thing is the very last scene in the show with Bruno and Kamala. And Bruno is telling her that, her brother asked if he would develop powers. Since the same bloodline, am I gonna get superhero abilities as well? And so, upon researching it, Bruno, who is like Bruce Banner level intelligence, all of a sudden, like bro is baby Stark over here, out of like left field. Now they putting a whole lot of stank on Bruno. This is I get sidetracked. Y'all know me, but they put a lot of stank on Bruno and his smarts. Now a lot has been said about a couple of black women in the MCU and their stakes as most intelligent. Their ranking as most intelligent in the Marvel universe, mainly Shuri and Riri Williams coming up, right? Don't y'all have Bruno out here discovering mutants, and we don't get some type of equal feat out of what y'all tell me is supposed to be the smartest black people in Marvel now? If you watch, you do the comic book reviews with us, of course, T'Challa, Adam Brashear, Blue Marvel, there we can go on and on. But in terms of what we got in the MCU right now, it's Shuri, it's Riri Williams. Unfortunately, it seems like T'Challa's intelligence in the MCU was never destined to be, but they're allowing a high school junior who's getting ready to go do a internship at Caltech. So, Shorty over there at MIT should be, and I don't mean just creating a suit, because discovering a genetic mutation in your friend that is going to be subsequently spread across the universe is a lot bigger deal than having your own Iron Man suit. I'm sorry. So we're going to have to put some real stank on Riri. That's all I'm saying. Let's boost her up the same way we boosting up Bruno. But in terms of Kamala Khan being a mutant, I think they're trying to tell us that, but I got two things with her being a mutant, right? Number one, Inhumans are dead. Stop talking about them. Kevin Feige hates them. I think even beyond the what was that, Jeff Loeb, who did the Inhuman series, I don't think he's fond of the characters. So let's just leave the Inhumans alone, and then if we get another one, be pleasantly surprised. But I think that part of it's over with, because I don't think they really want to convolute the X-Men's plight. There's a lot of parity between the Inhumans and the X-Men. And so trying to build up the X-Men the way that they should be, and then trying to bring Inhumans into that in some way and be able to create a distinction becomes a chore. And I guess I can understand why you want to avoid that. Why Kamala Khan has to then be it? It's good and bad, right? It's good because it gives her an opportunity to have some of those real stakes that we've been talking about all season. Bad for me, at least being a heavy X-Men reader, and my reason for reading X-Men is because it is the closest thing to a black experience being consistently told in Marvel Comics. The way that the X-Men are perpetually stunted, persecuted, murdered, had genocides perpetrated against them, it is a perpetual uphill battle, to say the least, to survive in their universe, right? You're going to put all of that on top of Kamala Khan, putting her in the eye now of hate immediately. We haven't really had time to build up the love and appreciation for Kamala Khan yet. I don't think it's solidified after just one season, especially this season. So then to put her automatically in the line of fire seems a little weird, because you would think you would want an established character to lead that charge. Now, again, we don't know. This for all we know, this is some teaser that they'll be edging us for the next phase and a half. Who knows? I do think that they played the animated series music for a reason, though. I think they said mutation for a reason. And if she's not the first, and maybe there's a mutant that's already out there, if they're retconning it like that, maybe there's already a mutant that we know that we just didn't know was a mutant in the MCU. So that's cool for her that the stakes are up. I hope they handle it well enough to not make her the torchbearer for all mutants in the MCU. Because I think there's some problems that come with that. Last thing I wanted to talk about is the mid-credit scene with Brie Larson, right? So we got Kamala Khan in her room coming back from, some ass kicking, some do-gooding, and she has a like a signal coming through on her bangle, starts lighting up. All of a sudden, boom, into the closet she goes. Out comes Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. At first, I was thinking it was the body morphing thing that we've discussed on here with Chill a couple times, one of her powers, which I was going to be very excited about because that, a little bit more closer to her actual power set in the comics. But then the more I watched it a couple of times, and it does seem like they changed places. I don't believe I saw a bangle on Carol Danvers when she came out of the closet. So I think whatever happened with that bangle, they switched places at that moment, and this is probably going to lead us into the Captain Marvel 2 or the Marvels movie that's coming out next year, featuring Kamala Khan, Carol Danvers, and Monica Rambeau. So now we don't really know what Carol Danvers' plot or main storyline in the movie is going to be. Chances are it's going to play heavily into whatever comes out of Secret Invasion. We now know how Kamala Khan plays into this, how she's going to get inserted into the movie somewhat. Interested to see what they're going to do with Monica Rambeau. Right? This is yet another installation to a movie that's supposed to be her follow-up or coming out in the cinematic world. And I don't think we have that many opportunities before that movie comes out for us to see her again. So leaving us in limbo a bit, we'll be paying attention. But in terms of Kamala Khan, while I feel like this first season wasn't everything you would want as a Kamala Khan fan, it wasn't something that is going to make the greater MCU necessarily fall in love with her or fall head over heels. I think we spent a lot more time on cultural education, to put it lightly, than actually building up the character, but they will have other opportunities. With that being said, give us your thoughts on episode 6, Ms. Marvel, and the whole series. Honestly, we've been doing loose reviews, but hope you enjoyed the cut with us and Chillmonger, and also my episode 6 review. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Come back every day, 10 a.m. Monday through Friday, for a new drop. Appreciate it.